So hi everyone, my name's Nikki. I work at Penfold. I'm the engineering manager here. I've been engineering manager for 3 years and a software developer for about 11 years now. I want to talk a bit about accelerating your career in a startup. I do think some of the things in here will potentially have a different opinion from the presentation that you just saw, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on the kind of beginning parts of your career from like junior to mid to senior, and how being in a startup can really kind of you know accelerate your career, essentially what it says. So let me just I'm going to just go through very touch on the career progression framework, the levels and key skills in each kind of bucket, why I think there's a real advantage in startups, and some of the challenges and trade-offs of being a startup, because it's obviously not all roses, and then quick summary, and then hopefully some questions at the end, if there are any. And so I think career progression is a really difficult one in tech because I don't think the industry has any consistency. So what you would define as a junior and associate engineer in one company will be vastly different from another company. Engineer can encompass, someone with 2 years experience or 5 years experience. Senior engineers is a terminal, what they call a terminal role, where you may not ever move past senior engineer because it's such a wide bucket. So it's really hard to know what role to apply for, whether you have the right skill set, and also what to focus on to go from junior to mid to senior. And I think that it really boils down to kind of the work that you're doing, and in particular, two key aspects. I've stolen this engineering ladder from Honeycomb. I've put the link at the bottom there. I think that it's a really, really good visualization of what I believe to be kind of all you need to know about the engineering ladder and the career progression framework. And that's to think of it in two aspects: ownership and scope. So their entry level job is that H1, the small circle at the bottom left there, going up to principal engineer, which is the H7. And really, as you get more senior, your ownership and scope grows. So where you'd be focused on a specific task and executing that task well at the entry level, when you kind of go into the more mid-level roles, you'll be focusing maybe on a feature, and then going up to a whole project, and then looking at the entire product, working with the product team on solution discovery, figuring out where we go with the product, the strategic vision, and then all the way up to the principal engineer, which is the company-wide problems. And so focusing on ownership and scope, I think is kind of the grounding foundations of like the key skills that we talk about. And so if we look at, I've just focused on junior, mid, and senior. There's obviously a bunch of stuff past senior, but I think this could take up, the first 10 years of your career easily. There's no real time frame on it. And, going from one to the other is all about, I think, different themes. So when you're a junior developer, it's really the themes are around, how receptive you are to feedback, how proactive you are in terms of your own learning, and how well you can complete well-defined small tasks. And so execution and learning being a really key theme as a junior developer. And then when you think about, okay, well, what do I need to do to get to this mid-level? It's all around efficiency and independence. So that's kind of taking on more ambiguous, less defined pieces of work, being able to figure out what to do and to implement it with a degree of independence. Obviously, there's a lot of support, but it's about understanding that maybe this is not the whole picture, figuring out what needs to be done, and then doing it. Expanding your knowledge of the code base to the point where you're really effective at debugging issues, and I think that's really key, especially with supporting the rest of the business and visibility to the rest of the business. If you're able to jump on issues and fix them. And then it's the fast pace of delivery as well. You're more confident in the code base, you're confident in your skills, and you're able to kind of get through work quite quickly. Then we move into the senior developer, which is more about the it's less about yourself and it's more about how the team are working, ensuring you're planning work and you're helping the team to work effectively. Looking at the like product roadmap, working with the product manager and designer on upcoming pieces of work, architecting large pieces of work to kind of make sure that it's scalable, but also understanding that you can't spend, a year working on this huge piece of work. And so understanding the trade-offs and the prioritization there. So the themes for the senior is more leadership and vision. And so where I think the advantage comes in with a startup is the opportunity you get to own things at a very junior level. If I just go back here from mid to senior, it's really hard to get the opportunity to show your leadership and vision. You need to be given that, the opportunity to take on that piece of work and to do it. And so in a startup, it doesn't really matter what level you are, as long as you're showing the kind of hunger and the desire to do it, along with being able to show that you can work at a good pace. And so I've got here visibility. So your communication, you're communicating directly with the rest of the business about this feature that you're owning. You can features at a junior level. We don't kind of discriminate there. We obviously give you a lot of support, but you can take on that ownership and you can contribute to the entire code base. So as opposed to just kind of writing the code, pushing up and forgetting about it, you need to make sure that it's been deployed to production. The pipeline is passed. Any infrastructure that is needed, it's in there, ready for release. There's a whole kind of aspect to it that's not just about writing code, and you learn that in a startup because you are in a very small team. You don't really have the kind of luxury of passing off to a team that is solely responsible for infrastructure. It's the responsibility of yourself and the people that you're working with. And I just wanted to highlight an example in Penfold. Alex has given me permission to tell her story, but Alex joined as an associate engineer in November 2022. Associate engineer is what we call our junior level of engineer. I did look this up in Jira before when I was doing the presentation. So in the last year, she's owned 32 stories, and by story, I just mean a feature or a piece of work that is delivered to the user. To the end user. So she's owned 32 stories. She's amended some infrastructure. She created an S3 bucket with Terraform for one of her stories. She practically found and fixed several production issues, and she became an expert in our file processor, which is actually a really complicated piece of like a process that she became the expert and the go-to person on. And so in August, she was promoted to engineer. I think that's was that 9 months maybe, because she just showed she was given the opportunity and she showed the skills that she could do that job. And now she's working with our staff engineer on an internal admin app for our operations team, just the two of them, which is taking on a lot of ambiguous, not very well defined requirements and figuring out what needs to be done. So she's done an excellent job. Some other benefits, and this is where I think I will directly contradict the last presentation, is to figure out what you like the most. I don't really believe in specializing early in your career. I think that trying out a bunch of different things, front end, back end, infrastructure, data, to really figure out what you like and what grabs you, and staying a generalist kind of as long as you can. I personally think that's the best way to just make sure that you're going down the path that you like the most. And then working on your whole skill set. Again, there was talk about being quite coding and not communicating as much, but I think in a startup you can't really afford to not communicate. You need to be talking to the rest of the business. You need to be doing a lot of post-release monitoring. You get to hone not just your technical skill set, but what would be defined as soft skills. But again, I don't believe they're soft skills. I think they're absolutely necessary skills to to grow. So communication, decision making, prioritization, all of those things. Understanding prioritization and trade-offs is another one that, again, you're going to have to make those decisions quite early on in your career. Do you do this thing now? What is the impact? How many users is it affecting? Those kind of decisions that you're involved in, no matter what your level is. And then I think also one thing that I really really liked when I joined a startup, and kind of why I started joining startups, is to gain insight into starting a company. You realize that the prioritization and the decision making is so different at a company that is at such an early stage versus a much larger Series A, Series B, or like a public company. You understand, and you get a lot of updates about funding rounds. You get to see a lot of stuff about starting a company that I wouldn't have known had I not joined a startup, and also I feel like set me up. So if I wanted to do that in the future, I think I could. And then lastly, just to see the impact of your work with users and become very user focused. Like what you're thinking about is, how do we grow our user base? And the user is kind of key to everything. And so not only when you release your work, you can see, and you're doing a post-release monitoring, and you can see how people are using it, what issues they're coming across. You get a lot of insight into user research sessions that product are doing, and you just, I think, become closer to the product. You're not just doing tickets, kind of pushing them through and then forgetting about them. I've kind of already talked about this slide, but what does ownership look like? It's not just developing and writing code. It's figuring out the QA plan. Again, we don't have any QA engineers. It's on us to test all of our work and make sure that it's ready to go. And then the communication and the monitoring afterwards. And of course, there are challenges and trade-offs to this. The more opportunity you have, the more responsibility you have. So where I think in a larger company, you may be afforded more time for professional development, you have to balance that in a startup with delivery. And so you have to be very driven and self-directed. You have to do self-directed learning. It just has to be that way. And you have to kind of push yourself to grow. There is in a smaller team, if you're one of 10 and in a team, and there are like 20 teams in a company, I feel like there's a little bit less pressure than if you are one of 4 developers in one team and that's it for the company. There's going to be a little more pressure on delivery, and so you just need to make sure that you're balancing those things, and you're not letting the delivery overwhelm you and not allowing you to do your kind of professional development. I do believe it's an environment where some people really thrive and some people find it quite hard. So I think that's definitely the biggest challenge for working at a startup. So in summary, just I think it's very rewarding, great way to grow your skills quickly. And I think the opportunities you get, I just don't believe that you would get in the large company. I started out in a very large company as a grad, and then I think that was maybe like 8,000 people, 9,000 people, and then kind of going down and down into smaller companies. And now I think in Penfold, we're at 45 people, and I feel like the sweet spot really of size. And then just the trade-off to consider, more ownership, more accountability, which is a great opportunity, but also a little bit of pressure, I guess. I've added a couple of links for further reading. There's a progression.fyi website, and it's got loads of companies' progression frameworks. So you can see all the levels and what they expect of each level. And then there's an article on career paths in big tech and scale up. So I've talked more about startups, but there are obviously, the career paths in larger companies to consider as well. that people might be interested in. And that's it for me.